The story of the gun decks, anecdotes and reminiscences. The gun decks of HMS Victory were not only places of fierce military action during the Age of Sail, but also spaces where sailors lived and worked under incredibly difficult conditions. The men who served aboard Victory faced immense challenges: extreme physical labor, constant threat of injury or death, and the emotional toll of battle. Yet, through it all, their courage, camaraderie, and resilience were forged in the crucible of war. Their stories, whether recounting near-death experiences, the bravery of young powder monkeys, or the simple joys of shared moments, offer us a glimpse into the lives of these extraordinary men who shaped naval history. 1. A near-death experience. One sailor, John Smith, a fictionalized account based on many of the seamen who served aboard Victory, recalled his time on the gun deck during the Battle of Trafalgar. The air was thick with smoke, the ship's timbers creaked under the weight of cannon fire, and the noise was deafening. He described a scene of chaos, where gunners loaded their cannons with frightening urgency, the flashes of muzzle fire lighting up the smoky decks. Smith's most vivid memory was of a massive cannonball crashing through the gun deck. "I was kneeling by the cannon, preparing to load it, when suddenly there was this terrifying crash above me. A cannonball the size of a small barrel shot past me, missing my head by mere inches, before embedding itself into the bulkhead on the other side of the deck," he said, still shaken by the experience years later. The shock of that moment never left him. "I thought I was done for. If I'd been standing just a hair taller, I would have been a goner. But there was no time to dwell on it. We just kept loading and firing, even after the ship was torn apart. It was all about duty. Our task wasn't done until we had no more ammunition left." For Smith and countless others aboard Victory, the threat of death was ever present. The air thick with smoke, the deck slick with blood, and the overwhelming din of cannon fire made it easy to forget the human cost of the battle. Yet, despite the constant threat of injury or death, the crew never faltered. They continued to load, fire, and reload, their focus unwavering, even as the ship itself seemed to be on the verge of collapse. 2. The powder monkey's courage. Among the most vulnerable aboard the ship were the young boys, known as powder monkeys. These children, often as young as 12 or 13, were responsible for running between the magazine and the gun deck, carrying powder to the cannons in the midst of battle. Their courage has been the subject of many anecdotes. One such boy, a 13-year-old named Tom, had worked on the ship for just under a year before the Battle of Trafalgar. Tom's recollections were filled with the terror he felt as the battle began. "When the battle started, I was terrified. The cannons fired so loud, and the ship shook with every blast. But I couldn't stop. I had to run back and forth to the gun deck with powder, and the smoke made it hard to see anything. Sometimes I could barely breathe. But I kept going, because if I didn't, they couldn't fight." What stands out in Tom's story is not just his bravery, but his deep sense of duty. Despite the fear, the smoke, the chaos, and the constant danger, Tom did not hesitate to fulfill his role. The powder monkeys were integral to the ship's operation, and without them, the cannons would not have been able to fire. In some of the more harrowing moments of battle, sailors would look out for the young powder monkeys, guiding them through the smoke and chaos. "I'd be running with powder, and men would shout at me to get down, or they'd pull me out of the way of falling debris," Tom remembered. "But I didn't stop. I had to keep running, even when I thought I couldn't take another step." These boys, some no older than the sons of sailors, displayed a courage beyond their years. They risked their lives in a relentless cycle of delivering powder, their tiny bodies constantly at risk as they sprinted across the decks under the deafening roar of battle. 3. In the heat of battle. A gun captain named William Davis, in his later years, would often talk about the sheer intensity of the cannon fire during Trafalgar. "I remember standing there with my crew, hand on the gun, looking up through the smoke and seeing nothing but enemy ships surrounding us. The deck was slick with blood, the air was thick, and yet the men worked with such precision. We fired with such power that my arm would ache for hours after a round, but we didn't stop. We had to keep firing, or we'd lose the ship." Davis described how the men remained focused on their task despite the overwhelming conditions. It was as though nothing else mattered except that cannon. We would load it, fire it, and immediately prepare to do the same again. Each round was louder, more deafening than the last. But we kept going. We couldn't afford to do anything but keep firing. For Davis, the memory was less about the victory and more about the camaraderie and sheer willpower that sustained the men. We weren't just fighting the French and Spanish. We were fighting the fear, the smoke, and the odds that we wouldn't make it through the day. Many men, like Davis, found solace not in the glory of victory, but in the bond they shared with their fellow sailors. The unspoken understanding that each man relied on the other for survival created a camaraderie that went beyond the battlefield. It wasn't just about the fight, Davis continued. It was about the men beside you. We knew that if one of us fell, the rest of us would pick up where he left off. There was no room for hesitation. Daily meals and drink aboard HMS Victory. Life aboard the Victory was grueling. The work was unrelenting, and the threat of death hung over every sailor, every moment. But amidst this hardship, the men had their routines, and their meals provided both the physical sustenance they needed to survive and, in a way, the emotional sustenance that kept their spirits afloat. Though often monotonous and far from gourmet, the meals aboard the Victory were essential to the crew's survival. 1. Breakfast, gruel, and hardtack. Breakfast was often a simple affair. Sailors were typically given a bowl of pea soup or gruel, a thin porridge made from oatmeal or peas. It was a staple of their diet, providing the necessary sustenance to begin a long day of work. Though bland and often unappealing, the gruel offered the nutrition the sailors needed to survive the physically demanding tasks of the day. Sailors would also receive hard, stale biscuits called hardtack, which were nearly impossible to chew but could be softened by dipping them in the soup. Breakfast was always the same, recalled James Clark. A lump of gruel that stuck to the spoon and a bit of biscuit that could break your teeth. But it filled you up, and that was all that mattered. We didn't have much, but we didn't complain. 2. Midday meals, salted meat and vegetables. By midday, the crew would receive a more substantial meal, though it remained basic. A typical meal consisted of salted meat, usually beef or pork, some potatoes, and a small portion of vegetables, like cabbage or turnips. The salted meat was tough and often overcooked, but it provided much-needed protein. The vegetable portion was often just boiled cabbage, a reliable source of vitamins in an era when scurvy was a common affliction due to a lack of fresh fruit. Thomas Riley wrote in his journal, "The salt meat was always tough, but after a long morning of hauling powder and cannonballs, we didn't mind. You could smell the meat cooking, and the few pieces of cabbage were a blessing." 3. The sea grog. The drink of choice for the sailors was known as grog, a mixture of rum, water, sugar, and lime juice. The ration of rum was a daily treat, although it was often watered down. Sailors looked forward to their ration of grog, especially after long, grueling hours on the gun decks. It was a source of comfort, a reminder of home, and a way to lift the spirits during difficult times. James Clark recalled, "We didn't get much, but when the grog came, it was like a bit of heaven. You drink it down quick, then get back to work." But those moments made everything seem bearable. In battle, the rum ration was sometimes given to men before they went into action, not just for morale, but to keep their spirits high amid the smoke and chaos. During Trafalgar, some sailors believed that the grog helped them endure the fear and exhaustion. 4. Evening stew, a symbol of survival. At the end of the day, sailors were often given a simple stew made of leftover meat, vegetables, and sometimes dried peas. This was another essential part of the daily routine. The stew was filling, warming, and helped to soothe the body after the exhaustion of the day. "The meals might not have been much," said one veteran of Trafalgar, "but after a day of battling, it was all we had to look forward to." The camaraderie and resilience. Despite the hardships, the men of the gun decks aboard HMS Victory shared a deep bond. Their days were filled with physical labor and mental strain. Yet it was this very adversity that forged their camaraderie. Through the noise of battle, the taste of stale gruel, and the harsh discipline of naval life, these men stood together. They didn't just rely on one another to survive the fight. They relied on each other to endure life aboard the Victory. Robert Blake, an old sailor who had served during the Battle of Trafalgar, remembered the aftermath of the battle, when all the noise had died down and the ship was still. We were exhausted, covered in sweat and blood. But when the battle ended, we looked around at one another, and there was this sense of pride. We hadn't just won a victory for England, we had done it together. And after all that cannon fire, the hardest part was just being able to sit down and share a cup of grog together. These moments of shared respite, when the men would gather together to drink, eat, and talk, became vital to their survival. These simple acts of solidarity provided the emotional and psychological support needed to face the next battle. Legacy of the gun decks. The stories of the gun decks of HMS Victory have survived through the ages, passed down through sailors' memoirs and the collective memory of the naval community. They serve as a testament to the grit, determination, and heroism of the men who served during the age of sail. The bravery they exhibited in the face of danger, the unshakable camaraderie they shared, and the sacrifices they made for their country left a legacy that would echo through history. In the end, it was not just the weapons of war that ensured victory for the British Navy. It was the strength of character of the sailors who manned the decks, their commitment to each other and their duty, and the enduring spirit that carried them through even the darkest days. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons to stay updated with more content. The creator of Polly Speaks For You has always been driven by a passion for giving a voice to those who need it most. Whether it's through text-to-speech technology or voice recognition, the goal has always been to create tools that help individuals, especially those with disabilities or learning challenges, communicate and interact with the world in a way that is meaningful and empowering. The stories shared, such as those about the sailors aboard the HMS Victory, are not just about reliving history. They are about the power of voice. Through Polly Speaks For You, the creator saw an opportunity to use storytelling as a medium to convey courage, strength, and resilience, much like the sailors of the past. These stories are intended to inspire and engage users, reminding them of the importance of their voices, both literally and metaphorically. The idea behind these stories is to showcase how technology, particularly speech technology, can be a tool for preserving history, while also empowering users with the capability to share their own narratives. By blending history with technology, the creator of Polly Speaks For You aims to demonstrate how powerful a voice can be in shaping and sharing our world, past and present. In a sense, these stories represent more than just entertainment. They are a way for the creator to give a voice to history, to connect with users in a deeply human way, and to remind them that their voices matter, whether they are telling their own stories or those of others. The creator's work in developing Polly Speaks For You was never just about making a functional tool. It was about making sure that every voice had the power to be heard. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons to stay updated with more content. This content has been adapted from the powerful features of Polly Speaks For You, South Africa's leading accessibility software. Learn more at www.polyspeaksforyou.co.za. We invite you to support this meaningful dyslexic initiative crafted and developed by an individual who personally understands the challenges of dyslexia.